repeal and replace Obamacare. Well, they flatlined in the Senate, you might say. Now there are new plans emerging. Good Tuesday morning to you. I'm John Scott.
And I'm Heather Childers. Chuck Schumer coming up with what I think he hopes will become a new term, repeal and run. We'll see if that catches on. We are live on Capitol Hill, as you just saw, following the implosion of the Senate health care bill after two GOP senators sealed its fate, as John just said, by announcing that they would join two other Republicans and vote no. Well, that led Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to admit that efforts to repeal and immediately replace Obamacare are dead. And now he's pushing for a straight repeal with a 2-year delay to give lawmakers time to pass a replacement. But the president seems to have some other ideas, and some GOP lawmakers are left frustrated by the whole process.
I'm tired of waiting. I think the American people, in fact, I know the American people are tired of waiting. How long do they have to wait to repeal Obamacare? How long do they have to wait to get a relief on their taxes? How long do they have to wait for Congress to act to actually get something done? I can tell you their answer is they've waited too long.
We have live Team Fox coverage. John Roberts is at the White House, but we begin with Peter Doocy on Capitol Hill. Peter.
John, this new plan to repeal appears to already be in trouble. The Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he wants to just bring to the Senate floor that bill that passed the House to repeal Obamacare back in May, and then add an amendment to repeal Obamacare like they did in 2015 and take 2 years to figure out what the replacement should be. But some Republicans are telling us now that they are going to need to be convinced to go along with that.
I don't know what that would entail. I assume there's something behind that. I don't support the House passed bill, so obviously I'm not going to support that bill. But if it's a process to get to a replacement, then as I've said all along, I'm willing to work with members of my party and Democrats to try to figure out a good replacement.
And Portman isn't the only one. Senator Shelley Moore Capito out with a statement just a few minutes ago. She appears to be a no for now, explaining that my position on this issue is driven by its impact on West Virginians. With that in mind, I cannot vote to repeal Obamacare without a replacement plan that addresses my concerns and the needs of West Virginians. President Trump had dinner with some Republican senators last night. One of the attendees, Senator Steve Daines, tells me there was no hint there that failure was coming. He also says, though, he is fully supportive of this new strategy.
I've voted for that bill once before, and so it's important that we do repeal Obamacare. We've made that promise to the American people.
Senator Rand Paul tells me straight repeal is what he's wanted all along. Senator Mike Lee says that he wants to vote on this 2015 bill if possible, but gaining conservative support is costing moderate support, and that is being noticed at the highest levels of the Republican Party.
We're going to have to pull our ranks together, it seems to me, to get it done. There's a lot of infighting. The Democrats aren't helpful at all, so it comes down to, can we pull all of the Republicans together, and I think we can.
And all the Republicans are getting pulled together for lunch next hour, so we expect to know a lot more about the way forward, including the timing of a possible repeal vote very soon. John.
Peter Doocy on Capitol Hill. Peter, thank you. And just this side note, it was Senator Jerry Moran of Kansas, Republican, who joined with Senator Mike Lee of Utah in announcing their opposition to the Republican repeal and replace bill late last night. Mike Lee will be our guest a little bit later on Happening Now. As for his part, Senator Moran is saying that he would be open to a yes vote on simply repealing Obamacare with a couple of years then to iron out some kind of a replacement plan. He also says he would want to make sure that people with pre-existing conditions are okay. So this thing is a cauldron still bubbling on Capitol Hill.
And we know what the CBO report was on that 2015 repealing just the ACA plan. So we'll see what he has to say about that. Well, President Trump, meantime, taking to Twitter, as you would expect, to respond to all this after the Republican health care bill collapsed in the Senate. John Roberts is live for us at the White House with more on that. Hi, John.
Heather, good afternoon to you. Sorry, I'm still on Paris time. The president wasting no time in switching to Plan B, encouraging senators to vote on a strict repeal plan and then replace it later on. The president taking to Twitter last night to say, quote, Republicans should just repeal failing Obamacare now and work on a new health care plan that will start from a clean slate. Democrats will join in. The White House really was blindsided last night by that move by Senators Mike Lee and Jerry Moran to torpedo the repeal and replace deal in the Senate. White House sources, though, tell me they think that was more of a protest against how Mitch McConnell was handling the process than anything particularly against the president. Now the president is reminding Republican senators, and there are 49 of them who fall into this category. You voted to repeal Obamacare in 2015. Explain to your constituents why you won't do it again. The vice president was speaking to the Retail Federation just a short time ago and said that they need to get on this. Inaction is not an option, and that Congress needs to do its job now. Now, you'll hear this refrain that, well, hang on, wait a minute. The 2015 vote was merely a show vote. We knew that President Obama was never going to sign it, and in fact, he did veto it. But the White House is going to make the case. Wait a second. You're voting for something you know wouldn't happen in 2015, but now in 2017 you won't vote for something you know will happen. The White House is talking about a 2-year, maybe even a 3-year sunset for Obamacare in order to get a replacement package passed. The date that I heard kicked around today is December 31st, 2020. Which would give plenty of time to craft a replacement. The president certainly looking forward to moving this process along, tweeting this morning, quote, we were let down by all of the Democrats and a few Republicans. Most Republicans were loyal, terrific, and worked really hard. We will return, exclamation point. And also tweeting, quote, as I have always said, let Obamacare fail and then come together to do a great health care plan. Stay tuned. The White House wants to get this done by the August recess, which is going to be a very heavy lift to try to flip everything around in both the Senate and the House. But they feel pretty good about it. They think if they can convince everyone who voted in 2015 to vote again, that gives them 49. Todd Young, the newly minted senator from Indiana in the House, voted for it in 2015. So they figure that's a yes vote. And then newly minted Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana has also indicated that he would likely come on board. So they think they've got 51 votes. But here's the catch. You can at least partially repeal Obamacare with 51 votes, but there may be a lot of things in there, Heather, that will actually take 60 votes to completely erase Obamacare. So that may be another problem that they're facing. Heather?
Yes, it is a long and tangled road. Thank you so much, John. We'll see what happens. Thanks.
So as John just reported, President Trump is now saying the GOP should let Obamacare fail and then come together and create a plan, as Republican Senator James Lankford insists health care reform has to be done.
We don't have enough votes. We have to have 60 votes to be able to do a full repeal of Obamacare. So we're trying to deal with what can we get done and how far can we go to be able to protect people. Now, I don't want anyone to lose track of the fact this is something that has to be done. This is kind of a no-fail moment that you have to be able to resolve all these issues. My focus for weeks has been, let's get all the people that disagree in one room and let's hammer this all out at one moment. And for whatever reason, we've not been allowed to do that, to get all of the different factions into one room at one time. We've all been negotiating one at a time. If we can get everybody together at one time and finish this, I think we can get it done.
Joining us now, Michael Warren, online editor for the Weekly Standard. So they voted in 2015 to repeal Obamacare. Senate passed it 52-47. Would they do it again?
Well, no. Apparently there are senators who are not willing to do that. And whether or not it's because now there's a chance that it could actually pass. I think it's a very difficult road to hoe. I do think it's interesting that Senator Lankford is talking about let's get everybody together and sort of hammer out some kind of compromise here. I think that's what a lot of voters thought the Republicans had been doing for the past 7 or 8 years, ever since Obamacare was passed. And so that, I think, is where you're probably seeing a lot of frustration from voters about why haven't the Republicans in Congress been able to get their act together on this. The other element of this, of course, is if this is so important and has to get done, as Senator Lankford said, where's the president been on this? As far as my reporting goes, the president has not been actively involved in lobbying members of Congress or certainly making public statements of support for this law.
Right. That 2015 vote passed with only a couple of Republican nays. at the time, and it passed in large part, it's felt, because everyone knew that President Obama would never sign the repeal of his own signature legislation. So now that you do have a president in the White House who says he would sign such a thing, all of a sudden some Republicans are getting cold feet?
Right, but it's also, of course, difficult to unravel. You go back to that 2015 bill. A lot of the biggest problems with Obamacare have to do with the regulations. That bill wouldn't have repealed any of them. That's a very difficult task to do unless you have 60 votes in the Senate, have that supermajority. And so that's why you're now hearing from President Trump, why does the Senate have this 60-vote supermajority rule on filibuster? They should just have a 50, simple majority vote. That might rankle some senators who like to think that they have control over their own body and a say on what their rules are. But that's sort of where the party is right now, trying to figure out how to get something done in this very unfortunate situation for them. They didn't think was going to happen.
Well, Mitch McConnell has been talking about bringing Democrats on board to try to come up with something. It seems like whatever the Democrats might want in a new proposal would be kind of anathema to the rest of the Republicans who are out there, even those who are wavering for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's right. And if we go back to, we remember back in April, the president even sort of threatened that he would work with Democrats on this. Look, there is just a huge gulf between Democrats and Republicans that the president really hasn't done anything to try to bridge. In fact, he's given Democrats every reason to not support anything that he supports. I think that's a big problem with this as well. If the president could go back to January, I think he might have reconsidered sort of pushing for Obamacare repeal first and tried to find something that he could actually get a lot of Democrats on board with, say an infrastructure bill. But this is what Republicans in Congress wanted, and the president went along with it without really, I think, understanding the complexities of trying to repeal Obamacare and replace it with something that the entire party could get behind.
And now Republicans have a big goose egg when it comes to their efforts to repeal and replace. All right, Michael Warren, Weekly Standard, thanks very much.
Thanks.
Yeah, asking for 2 more years after working on it for 8 already. So we'll see what voters have to say about it. Yeah. Well, in the meantime, homicide investigators in Indiana realizing or releasing some new information on the murder of 2 young girls who vanished from a hiking trail. So are they any closer to catching the suspect? Plus a dangerous situation with little relief in sight. Wildfires burning across several western states. The latest on the progress that crews are making against the flames.
It was horrible. It was orange. The whole sky was orange, luminous. Just everything was luminous. There was ashes falling.
Welcome back. Happening right now, some new details on some crime stories that we're watching for you. Police in Indiana releasing this sketch of the suspect in the murder of 2 teenage girls who disappeared from a hiking trail in February. And their bodies were found the next day. You may recall he is described as a white man with reddish brown hair between 5'6" and 5'10". Police in Florida say that a body found in a nature preserve has been identified as that of a missing teenage girl. 13-year-old Janessa Shannon was reported missing on July 3rd. Officers are treating the case as a homicide. And after multiple delays, the trial date for the woman accused of killing her fiancé on a kayaking trip back in 2015 is now set. Angelica Graswald has pleaded not guilty to charges of second-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. Jury selection begins August 15th.
Breaking details on the wildfires raging out of control in the west. One of nearly 40 fires tripling in size overnight in central California, forcing emergency evacuations. And crews fighting them say weather conditions are not on their side.
It was just bad. You just knew it was bad. It was completely out of control. They're really invaluable what they did. This is a very, very emotional situation for people.
It's hot, dry. We have dead vegetation, dead trees.
Alicia Acuna is live with more for us from Denver. Alicia.
Hi, John. Yeah, you mentioned there's nearly 40 wildfires burning right now. Well, keep this in mind. There are 800,000 people in the western part of the country who are ready to evacuate if necessary. Let's start with California, where there are several going right now. 15,500 acres have been destroyed by what's being called the Detweiler Fire. This is east of Lake McClure, for those of you who know this area. This one grew by 4,000 acres overnight. The fire took one home and damaged another, and crews say it's only 5 5% contained. In Nevada, 50 miles north of Reno, firefighters are trying to stop the relentless advance of the Long Valley fire. This one started across the border in California a week ago. It has already burned 83,000 acres across both states.
The aircraft has done a great job slowing it down long enough to get more personnel into the fire as it grows, and to get into areas that we're having trouble getting ground troops into.
In Northwest Oregon, about 70 firefighters jumped on a quick burning fire near Clatskanie. It burned 30 acres and is now fully contained, but those who live in this part of the state are worried.
This is the second fire we've had in Northwest Oregon in just the last week or so, and this is, July, and so we got a long fire season to go.
She makes a good point there. The National Weather Service has issued red flag warnings for parts of Oregon, California, and Nevada. John, to make matters worse, forecasters saying it's going to continue to be hot, windy, dry. Bad combo. John.
Yeah, no relief in sight, it sounds like.
Right.
Alicia Acuna, thank you.
Sure.
Well, coming up, a woman's family wants some answers after she was shot and killed by police after she called 911. Her grieving fiancé saying that he is desperate to know why she was killed as new questions arise about the officers involved. Plus, the battle to defeat ISIS in Syria with U.S. and British fighters now on the front lines, the progress that they have made against the Islamic State in just the last month. We're live in the region.
For me, this is a chance to absolutely go to the heart of darkness and grab it and get rid of it.
Right now, new progress in the fight to defeat ISIS in Syria as U.S.-backed Syrian fighters advance on the Islamic State's de facto capital of Raqqa, conquering a third of the Syrian city in just the last month. And British volunteers also doing their part on the front lines.
If we support these locals, like the Christians who I'm with today, then we can build a democratic framework for the country and actually advance us and sort of see a much more peaceful future for Syria.
John Huddy is following the story live for us from our Mideast Bureau in Jerusalem with more. John?
Well, Heather, not only British fighters are on the front lines, but also American volunteers are being seen increasingly more on the front lines in the fight to retake Raqqa, ISIS's de facto capital. One U.S. veteran, actually, who's fighting, said that described going to the heart of darkness in fighting ISIS, grabbing it and getting control over the heart of darkness. So we're seeing hundreds of volunteers, and we have seen hundreds of British and American volunteers on the front lines, not only in Syria, but as we've seen, Iraq as well. And some even have lost their lives. In fact, last month, 2 American and 1 British fighter were killed in battle. That said, as for the fight to retake Raqqa, let's pivot to that. U.S.-backed fighters, the Kurdish YPG and Syrian Democratic Forces among them, have encircled the city and made advances, recent advances, and continue to along the Euphrates River bordering Raqqa to the south. This is a fight that has already been going on for weeks. It will likely take several more weeks, if not longer. And as an indication, certainly if Mosul is an indication of the fight in Iraq, then certainly we could see this going on for a long time. Vicious fight that continues as we speak. And as it does, a ceasefire in southern Syria also continues, ultimately aimed at ending the country's civil war or leading to something broader. And remember, it was brokered by the U.S. and Russia. Now, Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel opposes the ceasefire. Initially, he had said Israel welcomes it, but that Israel has its red lines, including preventing Iran from a military establishment in Syria, in particular, along the border with Israel. And the prime minister's views, the opposition to the ceasefire, is really, some say, a departure from what they call his staunch and unwavering support of the Trump administration and the Trump administration policies. Now, U.S. officials haven't commented on the prime minister and Israel's opposition to the ceasefire, but Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Israel's interests will be considered in the ongoing ceasefire discussions. And also, he said, control of the so-called de-escalation zones along the borders of Jordan and Israel in southern Syria. Heather, back to you.
John Huddy live for us. Thank you, John.
Well, her heartbroken family wants answers after a woman was shot and killed by a police officer who responded to her 911 call. And now that the Senate health care bill is dead, Republicans are trying to figure out their next options for repealing and replacing Obamacare.
I thought the original plan was to do what we did in 2015, to repeal and then replace it over time, bring the Democrats to the table. They, after all, caused this disaster, certainly affecting my state. So I think we're in a good position now.
So with the GOP health care bill dead in the Senate, Republicans are looking for a way to move forward on their promise to dismantle Obamacare. President Trump reiterating his call to repeal now and replace later. And a number of Republican lawmakers are on board.
Remember, our repeal legislation has a 2-year wind down, so a 2-year phase in gives us time to work on the replacement. This is what we told the American people we were going to do. This is what we passed last Congress. So let's put the same thing on President Trump's desk that we put on then President Obama's desk. It will be a different outcome. President Trump will sign it. Then we can come together and work on a replacement to deal with those key issues that will bring down premiums for middle-class families. Let's just simply do what we said. Repeal it, then replace it.
So what are the prospects for all of that? Let's bring in Josh Holmes, former chief of staff to Senator Mitch McConnell, who helped coin the term repeal and replace. Also with us, Mo Elleithee, former DNC communications director and executive director of Georgetown University's Institute of Politics and Public Policy. So, Josh, I guess you would say it's a big defeat for Mitch McConnell. He thought he was cobbling together the votes for this new legislation, the Better Care Reconciliation Act, when Jerry Moran and Mike Lee, senators from Kansas and Utah, bailed out. There simply were not the votes there. Mitch McConnell has said, let's repeal it now and take 2 years to put together a replacement. Is that realistic?
Yeah, well, it's a big defeat for the American people who've been clamoring to have some action here about higher premiums and a broken insurance marketplace for the last 7 years. And, I do think there's a path forward. The good news is, as the majority leader indicated last night, they're going to be voting on a bill that they had passed and sent to President Obama in 2015, which not only repealed Obamacare, just a sec, John, it not only repealed Obamacare, but it provided the opportunity for a 2-year window where you can work across party lines to actually fix this system and provide real results for the American people. I think it's a perfect solution.
That was an easy repeal vote to cast, though, because everybody knew President Obama would veto it. So they could go on record as being in opposition. Now they have a president who would actually apparently repeal this thing. Isn't that a different kind of vote?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? It's an all hands on deck perspective for the Republican Party, in my view. The blast radius surrounding the fallout from not getting something like this done envelops everybody. And so, I think the American people are going to look at which senators and congressmen and members of the administration are working hard to try to get this over the finish line and who's sitting it out. They've all had a chance to vote on it.
Mo, Democrats are kind of sitting back and watching the Republicans handle this political hot potato. But your party can't be pleased with what's going on with Obamacare. You've got 9 states that are essentially down to only one insurance company offering exchange policies.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of layers here. First of all, I don't know a single Democratic member of Congress who hasn't said, look, there are certainly flaws in the system and we should work together to fix them, but we shouldn't go all out and just repeal it. And millions of Americans who would lose insurance, people would lose their protection against pre-existing conditions, et cetera, and so forth. So you see a lot of Democrats out there who are saying, well, let's work together to find fixes. I think Josh is a friend and a very smart political operative, and I think he would agree that this is a politically tenuous moment for the Republicans who are in control. They've had 7 years talking about repeal. And now when the rubber hits the road, they cannot seem to come together. And the war is not with Democrats here. It is within the different factions of the Republican caucus. Every time leadership took a step to appease the conservatives who had concerns, moderates balked. Every time they took a step to appease the moderates in the caucus, conservatives balked. And now you're seeing a good number of senators stand up and say, hold on, we're not on board with repeal without a replacement. Repeal without a replacement would cause lots of problems, even with the 2-year window would cause lots of problems, not the least of which throwing the insurance market into further chaos as insurance companies can't prepare for the long term.
Mo, let me interject on that point about why this is a Republican problem. The reason this is a Republican problem is because Democrats had 6 long years to fix whatever they thought was wrong with it and refused to do so. So here we are with insurance premiums that are going through the roof. You've got one or less than one insurer in 30% of the counties across the country, and we're left with an incredible mess here, and Democrats refuse to do anything. There's not a single Democrat that's out there saying, hey, here's a plan to go forward, and I could figure out how to work with Republican colleagues on that. They're just sitting on the sidelines. And I think, frankly, inaction while the healthcare system completely collapses is an extremely regrettable position to take, and that's where the Democrats are right now.
But the two parties do seem so polarized. I mean, Obamacare was passed with no Republican votes. Now Republicans are trying to cobble together some kind of repeal and replace legislation without Democratic support. Should there be some kind of a bipartisan effort, Mo, to get this thing back on the rails?
100%. I think one of the most disconcerting comments that the majority leader made recently was, when he kind of issued a threat to his caucus members saying, if we don't get this done now, we're going to be forced to work with Democrats. I can understand why that would be a threat to purists, but I don't think bipartisanship, look, maybe this is because I'm out of the game now, right? And I'm sitting here in my ivory tower of academia that I can say this is okay. But I don't think there's such a bad thing there. I mean, why work with? We ought to be working together. And when you have both sides saying, let's fix it, let's both sides own up and take some responsibility and work to fix it.
Well, Mo.
I think the problem is they don't make a lot of Democrats like Mo anymore, right? They're willing to actually work through the center. I mean, we've got a single payer or nothing caucus in the Senate and the House, and frankly, that's the bipartisanship there is a little scary.
Mo, we appreciate you coming down from the ivory tower to join us today. Josh Holmes, thanks for being here as well. We'll have you guys on again soon. Thanks.
Thanks.
Well, still to come, the U.S. Recertifying that Iran is standing by the nuclear deal, but the Trump administration also announcing new sanctions on the Islamic Republic. So what's next? This is a certifying Iran's compliance with the nuclear deal, despite tough criticism from President Trump on the campaign trail. But at the same time, the administration is also announcing some new sanctions against Tehran. And joining me now for more on all of this is Tom Rogan, who covers foreign policy and politics for the Washington Examiner. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good to be with you, Heather.
So let's talk a little bit about what we've heard happened last night specifically. We heard there was a lot of give and take, some strong words said, but at the end of the evening, the president did decide to certify that Iran was in compliance. Do you think that this was the correct move to make?
I do. I think I agree with the president that it is a bad deal, but you are where you are. And the focal point, I think, for American policy has to be, how do you address the weaknesses with the deal, but in a way that takes theme in a broader strategy in the region. And 2 points on that briefly. How do you get the Europeans to pressure Iran alongside the United States on ballistic missile development? And how do you have a broader strategy for dealing with Iran's malevolence in the region in terms of terrorism and political coercion?
Yeah, and one of the arguments in terms of making the case and to certify that Iran was in compliance is that when you take a look at what has already happened and much of the money that was frozen from the foreign banks, the crippling sanctions that brought about all the money, that's actually already gone to Iran. So pulling out of the deal would now leave Iran cash rich and then under no obligation to cap its nuclear stockpiles or allow international inspections.
Exactly, and the Europeans are in there. They are not in a position where they would pull out now, frankly, because of President Trump's unpopularity in Europe. European political leaders might look for a reason to buck against him. So the better thing to do is to say, I think, to recertify this, but behind the scenes, become more aggressive in making Iran understand that the days of the Obama administration's appeasement on things like the Persian Gulf, Lebanon, Iraq, political sectarianism that Iran does, which fuels ISIS, are over. So it's a double-sided thing that you can do here. And I think that is important. You simply say to the Europeans, listen, you are dealing with a different president now, and if you are not going to take the ballistic missile issue seriously, especially, then you should expect us to, in 90 days' time, come to a different conclusion.
But why did that not happen at this point? Because people at home are hearing you say you're dealing with a different president this time around, but at the same time, you know, the promises that President Trump made during the campaign, which was to rip up this deal, said it was a bad deal. He's now certified them, I believe, twice.
Well, look, realism in foreign policy demands that you deal with an issue at the moment. Of course, he did say something. He said a lot of things on the campaign. The focal point, though, again, I think has to be what drives American security interests into a positive direction. And I think at this point to pull out, as you suggest, that the money is already there. The contracts, especially with the European firms, are already there. And we don't yet have a strategy. I mean, the one thing the Trump administration needs to do is actually take the decisions that are necessary in terms of covert action, whether it be CIA or the military, in terms of pressuring Iran behind the scenes. And that if you just pull out at this moment, you're not going to affect the Iranian economy. You're going to isolate the United States with the Europeans. And again, that ballistic missile issue is not going to be addressed. I think if you take this more balanced approach, you can get the